one thing I forgot to add is that parking is also essential. And so what we've been doing is taking away some of the parking to add in some of these new implementation. And we have 40,000 people that live in this neighborhood. And out of the 40,000 people that live in this neighborhood, the majority of them drive.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
Okay, we're back on the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. We're doing more candidate episodes. I'm joined today by Lydia Millard, a candidate for City Council in Ward 10. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the time.
So let's take the temperature of Ward 10. When you're out campaigning, give me the top 3 concerns or issues that people are bringing to you.
Yes, that's a good question. So a lot of campaigning involves talking with residents that live in both homes and apartment buildings, as well as some of the business owners in the neighborhood. And so I'm kind of gathering information from all of those sources. And the main 3 things that are a concern, in this first one, that concern is the same regardless of age, gender, sex, background, income level. Every resident has a concern with public safety, and how public safety has increased in our neighborhood and how it has changed the livability of our neighborhood. So I would say that's the number 1 thing. The number 2 thing would be the supporting of the small businesses in our neighborhood, or lack of businesses in our neighborhood, with the amount of empty storefronts that we have along our commercial corridors. And then the last thing I would say is just the basic step of and basic job function of city council representative, which is listening and responding to constituents when they bring up concerns or questions or recommendations. Many are saying that they are unheard, unseen, or not responded to, or if they do receive a response, it is very blanketed, not a lot of substance, or not a lot of follow-up.
So tell me how you came to be running for city council. Like, it's not necessarily always going to be fun, right? You're going to make some enemies. People will be mad at you. So tell me why you would do this, how you came to make that decision.
Yeah, that's also a good question. So there's actually a few different reasons about why I'm running. And one of the first reasons is the presidential election, this past one with Kamala Harris, was really instrumental for me as a Black woman, and seeing that we thought we were ready for a different time. And so watching that defeat was really heartbreaking for me. And prior to that, I have not been involved in politics at all. I don't have a political background. And so watching that defeat kind of like catapulted that mindset of like, what can I do? How can I be involved? What impact can I make on my community that's more than what I'm doing now? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing was I'm currently the executive director for Stevens Square Community Organization. And so being the executive director for that organization, you develop a lot of relationships. A lot of what city council does, I do now, just on a smaller scale. So all of the relationships with the residents and business owners and other neighborhood organizations as well. Also relationships with the city council and the Hennepin County Commissioner, as well as the Park Board Commissioner. So all of these relationships that I've built over the time that I've been in that role has kind of made people see my work differently and see me differently. And so I've had a few people just kind of nudge and say, hey, have you ever thought about running for city council, because we need someone like you. And so that coupled with the Kamala Harris defeat was kind of like the catapult that I needed. And then I think I would say the last thing was I don't just make decisions hastily. I really do have a good circle around me. My family and my friends really are instrumental in my life, and I have a very good relationship with people to be able to go to them and say, hey, I respect you. This is something that I'm looking to do. How do you see me in that role? Do you see me in that role? Do you think that I would be successful in that role? And what are some things that I should be thinking about or considering when taking on that type of role? And so after having that conversation with family and friends, there really wasn't one person that was just like, Lydia, I don't know about that. Every person was
there had to be somebody.
Yeah, I figured that at some point in time, someone was going to say, nope, Lydia, I don't think that's a good idea. Maybe you should reconsider, and these are the reasons why. But there wasn't one person in my family that, or my closest friends who said, no, I don't see that. Every person was like, actually, I don't know why you haven't done that already. And that sounds just like you. Like, you're already doing that work without pretty much that title. So it sounds like an easy transition for you. So it was kind of those three things was enough confirmation for me to be able to move forward and make that decision.
So tell me about one issue that really gets you going. I know in my life I can think of things that cause me to get involved, to make a phone call, to show up to City Hall. So I'm wondering, like, what is that for you, like a defining issue?
Yeah, so within my first month working for Stevens Square, like the first week I was employed, actually, there was a program that was coming down from DHS, and it was a recuperative care facility that they were looking to roll out. And one of those recuperative care facilities was looking to actually be added to 18th and Nicollet. Now, in the Stevens Square neighborhood, 18th and 19th and Nicollet are kind of like our problem areas where there's a lot of congregating, a lot of drug dealing, violence, and things of that nature. And so having something like that in addition to the neighborhood is not beneficial for the neighborhood. It's kind of detrimental, mainly because the recuperative care facility was going to have unhoused residents coming from all over the Twin Cities into this one concentrated area. It wasn't necessarily taking the unhoused residents that were nearby Stevens Square or even nearby Ward 6 and helping them. It would be people coming from like St. Louis Park or St. Paul or Plymouth, from those hospitals where they needed additional wound care, but they were kind of taking up a bed. And so instead of taking up a bed, this was a way to transition them into a facility where they could still get the care that they needed, because a lot of those unhoused residents end up returning back to ERs within 72 hours because their wounds are infected or things of that nature. So it was supposed to be wound care coupled with trying to help with like job security and other resources to like transition into permanent housing. So the concept itself was great. The issue was that there wasn't a lot of guardrails put around the program. So they didn't have a lot of details about like security or like whether or not the type of residents that, accepted to be in that program would be on a lockdown or if they'd be able to freely roam around the neighborhood. If they had to leave for an appointment and come back, could they have visitors? And, food, how would that work? How would they supply that? If we have emergency vehicles, because the location that they were looking to get into was right above a medical facility, Access Medical Facility. So if emergency vehicles needed to get around in that area, there would be some congestion. And then what is the discharge procedure look like once those unhoused residents are complete with that program? Are they bused or transported to a different location, or are they just kind of like let go and say have a great life? So there was just a lot of uncertainty. So my first month was going to city council meetings, working with the business owners in the neighborhood, and one of them being Access Medical, and working with the residents that lived in the neighborhood, as well as the board members of Stevens Square, and saying, hey, this is how we feel that this type of business would be detrimental to our neighborhood, because we were actually looking to get a grocery store right across the street. Because there isn't a grocery store nearby in that neighborhood. The nearest one is Aldi on Lindale, or the Lunds and Byerly's on Hennepin, so everything is kind of out of the way. So we were trying to get something right in that neighborhood. So once the business found out that this recuperative care facility might be right across the street, they pulled out. So there were other things that kind of factored into why we felt the need to kind of rush in and be a voice and an advocate for the community. So that was one thing, as far as I'm concerned, I was really passionate about, because we put together a map of how many social services in the neighborhood was similar to that program. And there were 36 services that were similar to that program. So a part of the advocating piece was, why are we reinventing the wheel? Why can't we find one of those services that already exist, that's successful, and scale that, right? If they need more staffing, if they need a bigger building, or whatever the case is. So that was a part of that advocacy piece.
So I wonder, so were these medical facilities the other 30-some businesses that were similar?
It was a combination of medical facilities, social services, housing providers, things of that nature, mental health, substance abuse,
Right.
kind of like a combination of a few different things.
So I wonder what you think the solution is, because I think, so there was a similar project proposed for Uptown, and there was controversy surrounding that. Mm-hmm. And it feels like it's a Medicaid thing. Like, it is newly available for reimbursement from Medicaid, and so people come in, they see an opportunity. We're gonna start up a business to fill this need. Mm-hmm. But no matter where you want to put something like this, and you acknowledge that it's a legitimate need, you're going to have surrounding neighbors and businesses saying, well, this will be a disaster for us if you allow this here. And it doesn't really matter where you propose it. People will say that. And then you end up with like this patchwork of zoning restrictions where you say, not here, not there, not here. And then you end up with a zoning code that doesn't allow it anywhere, even though it's a big need. So I wonder what you see the solution to that being for your neighborhood and others, and also for the people who maybe need medical care.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you bring up. That was a conversation that we had during those city council meetings. Was pretty much every other neighborhood was like, not it. Like, we don't want that in our neighborhood either. And so I understand why, but there was a successful integration of that actually in Duluth, where they actually added that type of facility onto the hospital that already existed. So you're not paying to transport people. You're not creating another facility in a residential neighborhood / business corridor. You're keeping the concept where the initiation actually occurs, which is at the hospital. So it's basically expanding the hospital. And so I think that that's a great idea, to be able to expand the resource of where it's coming from versus adding on another lever. But that's just one idea. And, there's always multiple ideas of how you can maybe, create that type of environment that's safe, right? But we haven't gotten the budget and the type of data to be able to support, like you said, kind of where the most ideal place would be. But that, in my mind, it sounded like a good idea to just extend what was already there.
So trying to understand the argument against the incumbent Councilmember Chugtai. Mm-hmm. So on your website, you say, after 4 years of inaction in Ward 10, there are many problems to solve, but I'm committed to listening deeply and doing the work. So keying in on the word inaction, I wonder, like, inaction on what specifically from Councilmember Chugtai?
Yeah, so I think the main inaction would be that listening and responding to constituents. I have talked to so many people who said they've tried to reach out to her via text, not text, but a call, an email, a letter, and they just did not receive a reply. And so people after a while are going to just stop reaching out. People are also going to take notice that they elected someone who doesn't see themselves as available, who doesn't make themselves available. And then you also have 2 policy aides. So it's not as if you necessarily need to be the one always responding to everything, but your policy aides are not responding as well. And this is also a person who advocated to get a 3rd policy aide because they had a lot to do in Ward 10. So it just kind of brings up those questions, and sometimes those questions cause people to look at your leadership differently, to look at you as a representative of Ward 10 differently. And that is why someone coming in and saying, hey, I'm here, I'm available, I'm present, not only will I respond back to you, but I will respond promptly, will be a breath of fresh air for those who have felt like they were unheard and unseen.
So you also say on the website, the status quo cannot continue. Under the current council member, we have seen, number 1, Whittier become the most dangerous neighborhood in the city. Okay, I'll go through all 3 and then maybe we can take them one at a time. So Whittier, the most dangerous neighborhood in the city. Countless business closures of local treasures, including the YWCA, Galactic Pizza, Red Dragon. The budgeting process hijacked by pet projects. And increased property taxes 35+% over the last 4 years. So Whittier, on the crime issue and Whittier becoming the most dangerous neighborhood in the city, I've seen robberies go up over the last year, especially high. It's a little better this year. And how do you see the council member as responsible for violent crime? Because we've also seen the police budget go up $50 million since 2022. We have seen the council approve record raises for MPD. And we also know that the mayor is in charge of the police. So I'm wondering, how do we hold the council member responsible for crime?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a part of being a council member is that you're supposed to have relationships that you develop, maintain within that role. So all of those key stakeholders that involve public safety should be relationships that we have. And our current council person has definitely made a stance that those relationships are not important to them. And this is not just coming from my personal view. This is also coming from those key stakeholders as well. And that has been detrimental for us to be able to, one, be included, and to really be able to create a plan that helps to target and address these issues that are within our neighborhood, using some of those things that you mentioned earlier, the budget that's increased and the pay raises that we've provided for the officers. Specifically, though, the area of Whittier, the crime has increased tremendously. A part of that is, like you said, robberies is one part of it, but gun violence has increased the most in that neighborhood, as well as drug usage. The fentanyl and opioid epidemic has really affected that neighborhood a lot. And that epidemic also increases crime because people will resort to crime to be able to get their next fix. And so I think that there is several different mechanisms that could have been used differently to establish better relationships in conjunction with the relationships that the mayor also has in order to create a comprehensive plan, because it's not just Ward 10 that has crime. Ward 10 affects Ward 7, which affects Ward 8, which affects Ward 4 and 5. So I think overall Minneapolis needs to have a better comprehensive plan about how we're addressing public safety. And Whittier just happens to be one of the areas in our neighborhood that's the most impacted by crime, statistically shown.
And then the second point, countless business closures, YWCA, which is in Ward 7, Galactic Pizza, and Red Dragon. I think the YWCA closed because of a years-long decline in like gym and swim. I think I read an article where they're like, the gym and swim model just isn't working for us and hasn't been for years. Red Dragon, I think they blamed the food apps, the food delivery apps for their closure. It's hard for me to connect any individual business or organization closing to the council member. So how do you make that connection?
Yeah, so I've actually had conversations with the business owners. And one of the most recent conversations that I've had is with Lagos Tacos, because they are also looking to close. Iron Door just closed actually this past Sunday. And the main reason when I'm talking with business owners is they don't feel supported by our current council person. That same sentiment I've said earlier about actually reaching out and trying to speak with the council person, they have felt ignored as well. They don't feel that our current council person represents small businesses, supports small businesses, because the concerns that they've brought have been ignored and unheard. And so I do believe that they do play a role because they are a part of our community. Small businesses are really the backbone of our community because small businesses provide jobs. And so in the case of Lagos Tacos, 4 of the employees that work there live in our neighborhood. Only one of them lives right outside of our neighborhood, which is in Loring Park. But that just goes to show that when small businesses shut down, that decreases the amount of jobs that are available in our neighborhood. And so I do believe that council has a role to play when it comes to supporting the businesses, because the residents in the neighborhood like to be able to support the businesses in their neighborhood as well. And if we are decreasing the amount of businesses in our neighborhood, then what people are going to have to do is go outside of their neighborhood for essentials, go outside of their neighborhood to go to a different type of restaurant. We should be able to provide everything that is needed for livability within our own neighborhood so that it is walkable or bikeable or busable. And so we are eliminating those things. So one of the things that Lagos Tacos talked about was they are actually moving when their lease is up to St. Louis Park. And the reason that they're doing that is because the same construction that is happening currently on Hennepin is being proposed to happen on Lindale next year. And so the businesses have watched what has happened to those businesses on Hennepin and
Right.
how
But the Lindale reconstruction is a county project, though.
Correct. It is a county project for roads and construction, absolutely. But what they are afraid of is, one, the longevity of the project, whether or not that project is actually going to make the deadlines as they intend, because that's been a huge problem with the Hennepin with the Hennepin Avenue construction, is that they have missed deadlines or been behind. They are currently on track and set to be complete in December, but we just never know how that's really going to turn out. And also, the entire Hennepin Avenue was done at one time versus chunks of it, to be able to give businesses time to kind of recover and to be able to have a little bit of breathing room in between, one part of the avenue being done versus the next. And so I actually talked with the Hennepin County Commissioner, Marion Green, and discussed some of these issues, and one of the things that she stated is that they are taking a lot of feedback from residents, from the community, about what is going to happen on Lindale, because of there has been so much vocalization about what will happen on Lindale based on what has happened on Hennepin. So I think that there's some learning pieces that we can implement for Lindale. They aren't sure if they may include bike lanes yet. They aren't sure if they may reduce parking yet. And that comes from the constituents in that neighborhood that's going to be affected really vocalizing what they would like to see in their own neighborhood.
So on the point of transportation, do you like the outcome on Hennepin Avenue? Do you like that design with the bus lanes that are parking part of the day, and then the bike lane, the narrowing of the street, the conversion of 4 lanes to 3 lanes, some of the traffic calming features to make it pedestrian friendly? How do you feel about the Hennepin Avenue design?
Yeah, good question. So there are basic maintenance pieces that we're going to have to do on roads every 50 or so years. So maintenance is something that we cannot avoid, and fixing sewer lines and things that, and replacing pipes is something that we need to do to make sure that, you know, everything else kind of runs smoothly. So I do understand the reason behind having the construction. Once saying that the construction is going to be implemented, saying how can we improve the streets based on our current conditions or future conditions, is a good time to analyze those things. The bus lane that was placed. I worked for Metro Transit at one point in time, so I'm a very big avid contender for riding public transportation. I also grew up riding public transportation as well, and so I do miss kind of like those times when, you know, there were more public transit riders, but public safety also is a reason why that ridership has decreased, a part of it, and then people work from home more, right? So I understand the reasons why some of the public transportation is not what it used to be, and so that lane is great for the buses to be able to get down the avenue, because they don't have to weave in and out of traffic, which causes congestion, which causes, you know, the people behind them to be late, which causes, you know, people, if they got to stop and pick up someone who might have a disability, it takes a little bit longer to get them on the bus. That may cause some frustration with the people either riding the bus or the people waiting for the bus. So I think it helps to be able to maneuver traffic, especially during that rush hour period. One of the things that I find inconsistent is that the Hennepin Avenue South, technically the west side, has been complete. We already have the red lane for the buses. I drove down that lane this morning, and what I've been noticing over the past week is that the red paint that they just put down last year is already chipping. So I'm very curious as to, as we move forward, if this is going to be something that we implement, how are we strategizing better materials to use that have a little bit more of a longer shelf life, so that we're not consistently implementing something and then going back to fix it, not even, you know, a year later. Also, the road wasn't necessarily repaved, so there's a lot of like potholes that you are trying to kind of weave in and out of. So it's like, if we were going to add a transit lane, we should have repaved the road in the process of that as well. Reducing the lanes is mainly because you're adding a turning lane, which is needed at a lot of these side streets. Also is, you know, helpful for the medians to help pedestrians be able to cross from one side of, you know, Hennepin to the other safely, and so that's needed. So those are like kind of like the essentials that I think overall are needed, but at the same time, I think that there's a better way that we could be rolling these processes out that have a little bit more longevity.
Okay, so it sounds like you're positive on the Hennepin reconstruction as far as the design goes.
The design is fine, but one thing I forgot to add is that parking is also essential. And so what we've been doing is taking away some of the parking to add in some of these new implementation. And we have 40,000 people that live in this neighborhood. And out of the 40,000 people that live in this neighborhood, the majority of them drive. And if we want people to come visit our neighborhood, they are also going to be driving. And so we need to keep that in mind as we are making these decisions about where we are and where we would like to be, because there's a big gap of where we are and where we would like to be. Where we would like to be is more energy efficient and less consumption of CO2 emissions and gases and things of that nature. But we're not there yet. We still got 40,000 people that live in this neighborhood, and the majority of them drive. So we have to create opportunities for people to be able to come visit our neighborhood, which means they need somewhere to park. And then we also need opportunities for people who live in the neighborhood and drive to be able to have some place to park. So I do agree with some of the things, but there are some things that I don't agree with because it doesn't make practical sense for the majority of people that live in the neighborhood.
So there's a tension there. So anytime the city does a traffic and parking study for one of these projects, they will find that parking utilization is well below what you will hear reported from business owners. That was true on Hennepin Avenue. Mm-hmm. And so there's a tension between the demand for parking, the political demands for parking, I should say, and all the space we have given over to cars, like you only have so much space in the public right of way. And so, I mean, you have to take some of it from cars because cars currently have all the space. So if you're going to add things like safer spaces for pedestrians, a bike lane, for example, a bus lane, a median for crossing, like that conflict comes up, and you have to make compromises with your space and decide where we're going to prioritize things. And I think it's always going to come from the space we've given to cars because that's where the space is. So how do you deal with that conflict? Because if you decide, well, we can't ever take parking away, then you really never do anything to improve the city.
Yeah, so that's a good question that you bring up. So there are alternatives of what we could do for creating other options for people to be able to have more levers with the roads that they're using. Our main avenues, our main streets usually have the most congestion with cars. So it's not the most practical location to implement some of those strategies because those main avenues are utilized heavily by vehicles. And we've got enough data to support that. There's more data to support that than data to support removing the option for vehicles. We could implement more opportunities like the Greenway is a great opportunity that we've implemented already that I use. I'm a biker. And I live right at the end of the block of the Greenway. I love being able just to get on my bike and go down the Greenway and go to the lakes if I want to, or go down towards downtown if I want to. And that clears the congestion from vehicles. It's safe because you don't have to worry about a cone being the only thing that keeps you safe from the vehicle next to you. And it's specifically for bike riders. And so I would love to implement more of that type of strategy within our city versus taking our main avenues where we know cars utilize it the most and trying to force that into a transformation that we clearly don't have yet. When it comes to the residents in the neighborhood. And that comes back to that piece of like, are we really listening to the residents and the business owners that live and have to work and play in these neighborhoods? And are we making the decisions that really take those things into an account? Or are we trying to force something new upon people knowing that we are not in the position for that to necessarily be successful yet?
So I think the main streets are where a lot of the people are, especially in Uptown. And when you look at the city's high injury streets, it is all very busy, high traffic, high speed streets where some of these treatments are needed the most. You could argue like interior streets like Aldrich and Bryant and Colfax, you're not seeing these problems. You probably definitely don't have to add bus lanes, probably don't have to add much in the way of pedestrian safety features, probably don't need a bike lane. But on the main streets, that's where people are getting hurt and killed in car crashes too. Like these streets are dangerous for people driving. And so I think like there's a better argument for doing it on main streets than others.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the safety piece and the car accident piece, that is something that can be talked about not just within Ward 10 or even within Minneapolis. That's the consensus with pretty much any major city, is that all of kind of like the heavily populated avenues and streets usually have the most accidents. That is kind of across the board. But solving that issue doesn't mean taking it away. That's not solving the issue. Because people, if they're distracted driving, if they're drunk driving, or if they, are speeding and things of that nature, that type of instance and adding a bus lane or a bike lane doesn't prevent that from happening. So it doesn't necessarily take away that issue. I think there has to just be more accountability for those drivers who are breaking the law and breaking those rules as they're driving, to be able to help reduce some of that issues. I don't think adding or taking away lanes or adding a bike lane or taking one away is going to help reduce that. I think accountability on drivers is what's most needed.
So do you believe in traffic calming, like the idea that either narrowing lanes, instead of a 12-foot lane, we've got a 10-foot lane. Instead of 4 lanes, we've got 3 with a middle turn lane. Do you think treatments like that, where you narrow the road space and maybe take a lane of traffic away, do you think that slows driver speeds?
I think Lindale is a good example of that. Lindale had a lane taken out to be able to include a turning lane. It added a median for pedestrians to be able to cross. So it does create a lever where people, kind of have to reduce their speed and things of that nature. But do I still see people whipping corners? Do I still see people speeding through? Do I still see people driving reckless? Absolutely. So that's why I was saying it doesn't necessarily eliminate. I think we've got to bring back driver accountability. What we're doing is we're trying to solve a problem and not fix the root issue. And the root issue is driver accountability. The mechanism that we're trying to use to solve driver accountability is adding all of these additional levers, which is not necessarily solving that root cause.
So I agree we need both. We need enforcement and accountability. We also need streets that are better designed because, would you say we need both of these things?
Yeah, I think there's, in life, there has to be a balance, right? And I think that when you are looking at a community as a whole, we have to keep balance in mind. We have cars and we have people that bike and we have people that ride the bus. There has to be a balance. You can't prioritize one or over the other, because that is not what is inclusive and holistic for everyone in the community. So there has to be a balance. We have to balance safety with the ridership and the drivers that live in the neighborhood. And we have to keep that balance at all times with knowing kind of like how our communities are changing, and how people are living their lives in the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And we kind of have to continuously keep that balance. What we cannot continue to do is try to prioritize one or over the other, without keeping that balance, because that means you're leaving someone out. You're leaving a demographic out, and that demographic still has to live, work, and play in this neighborhood.
Do you think the 2040 plan was a good thing?
I think there were certain aspects of it that was good, but I don't necessarily. That kind of came way before. What we're seeing in real time is it playing it out. So I think at this point, what I like to focus on is how we're going to move forward, because what's been done has already been done. We can't undo it. So I think we need to come together as a community and collaborate and partner and figure out how do we move forward, because we can't take back what's already been done.
So philosophically, though, so the 2040 plan kind of kicked off a movement nationally, or was part of that, to say we need more housing in our urban areas. We need to loosen some of the very restrictive zoning that just makes it impossible to build anything but a single family home in most places. And so philosophically, do you agree with that? Like we need to allow more and denser housing, more housing types. Do you agree with that philosophy?
Well, we live in a dense neighborhood right now, right? And so I think that there is a different way of life to offer in all parts of Minneapolis. Because if you were to go, just a little bit north, it's not as dense. There's more single family homes. Even in Stevens Square, where I work, it's a very dense population. I mean, there's 4,500 people within 1 mile radius, right? And then you go a little bit further south, Minneapolis, in Ward 8, and you get back to that residential duplex single family housing. So I think there's a variety of options that are offered within Minneapolis, and that's what makes us so unique. And where you choose to live is kind of based on like your preference, and I like that people have that flexibility to have that preference. So I think that there are some things that, like I said, that are that work very well with the 2040 plan, but there are some things that we just have to figure out how do we move forward. And it's because there are some things that are done that we cannot undo.
Do you think it was a good thing that we eliminated single family zoning as a category? Eliminate the requirement that in the vast majority of the city you can only build single family homes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in this economy, we got to have creative type of housing. Um, a part of the reason that we have, a mixture within Uptown is a part of that as well. We've got single family homes, and we have a lot of rental properties. We also have some residents who actually own a duplex, and they live on one side and rent out the other, so it's an additional source of income. And so, there are multiple things that I work for multiple different people, because of some of those zoning restrictions kind of changing.
So let's talk about encampments. How do you feel about the city's current approach to encampments?
Yeah, so right now, with the encampments, it's kind of a sweep. So if we find an encampment, we sweep that encampment, bulldoze over it, pour a fresh slab of concrete, and that encampment moves, and it's kind of like playing whack-a-mole. We're just moving one encampment from one place to the other, to the other, to the other. That is not solving the root cause. So one thing I'm very passionate about with anything that I stand for, that I'm passionate about, is finding the root cause. Because once you find the root cause and you start actually developing a plan around that, then that creates solutions, that creates opportunities, that creates partnerships. And so the root cause, and I'll give you a little bit of background. So working for Target, when I first started working for Target, I actually worked in the stores. And I was at the store that's located in downtown Minneapolis. And when I started there, it was around COVID. So we had a lot of unhoused residents and homeless people coming into the store, either to just get out of the cold, or because it was too hot, or because it was raining, or any of those things. And so I worked at the front. I was in charge of service and engagement. So I was a person at the cashiers, the self checkout, your guest services. So I was the first person you seen when you walked in the store. And so being in that position, you start seeing some of the same faces. You start having conversations with some of these people to kind of figure out, and this is just my curiosity, like, how did you get here? Like, what happened to kind of, put you into the situation? And I think what people will find surprising is that people are not afraid to tell their story. And that they do actually respect you more for asking a question versus looking at them and judging, or some of the things that they encounter being in that position. And so what I found is that a lot of them are addicted to some type of substance abuse, whether it's drugs or alcohol. Some of them have a mental instability. So whether it's like schizophrenia or depression or anxiety, or some type of neurodivergence that causes them to not be able to function on a regular basis. And so that causes them to not be able to keep a job, or be able to manage their finances, or whatever the case is. Some of them are veterans, right, who you know don't have the support that they need to kind of be able to sustain. Some of them are teens, are youth. They got kicked out of their house because they have instabilities at home between mom and dad, or maybe they came out to their parents and stated that they were part of the LGBTQIA plus community, and their family didn't accept them. So there's just a lot of different mechanisms that can cause someone. I talked to someone who got divorced, and their spouse took everything in the divorce, and so they had to pay alimony, and the alimony was more than what they were bringing in, and so they weren't able to pay alimony and pay their rent, and started to slowly decline. So there's just so many different circumstances that can equate to someone being in that position. And a lot of times we should be really grateful that sometimes we've had the type of upbringing that we've had, because a lot of us could be one decision or one missed paycheck away from being in that position. And so approaching homelessness with a more humane aspect is what's needed. And I don't think that playing whack-a-mole and moving encampments from one place to the next is really giving that humane aspect, because that's not fixing anything. And so we need to create a better and put more money behind, the transitional housing, and how are we getting people into a treatment program if it's needed, into a facility if it's needed, and being able to transition them into more of a permanent housing situation, getting them the job skills that are needed. One of the things that St. Paul is doing is they are actually hiring unhoused residents or homeless people to be able to clean up like the light rail and the garbage that surrounds some of the overflow of garbage. And so they're giving them these small jobs and small tasks and creating a income with that, and then helping that to transition them into some type of transitional housing. So I think that we need to look better at the humane aspect of it and figure out how can we really help these people and not just displace them from one place to the next.
So a lot of things we're talking about, whether it's encampments or crime, these are things that the mayor has a lot to do with. And so my question would be, do you think Mayor Fry, as the strong mayor, has been a successful mayor? Should he be reelected, do you think?
Well, when it comes to this is a mayor's race, and so because it's a mayor's race, there's other candidates that are running as well. And I know every candidate running except for the only person that I haven't personally met or had a conversation with is Emily Koski. But outside of that, I literally know every person running. So when it comes to the mayor's race, I'm kind of staying out of that. I'm remaining neutral. Who I'm for or who I'm not for is not something that I'm concerned about, but I will be able to work with anybody that is a mayor or will be the mayor.
Is there a council member where you think, wow, I really like the way they do things?
Yeah, so I actually really respect Latricia Vitaw. I think that she has really made some instrumental strides with the North Side, coming from someone who grew up on the North Side of Minneapolis. And that's where I was raised. I was raised right on 39th and Emerson. And so I really do appreciate what she's done to address some of the long systemic issues that have been occurring in North Minneapolis, and how she is really developing really great relationships and partnerships to really grow that community, and to not only just grow it, but provide visibility as to what she's doing and the transparency of what she is doing, and inviting others to be able to participate in that. I think that's exceptional to see from a leader, because we don't currently have that with where we are right now. And so that transparency piece is causing people to not only understand and know what's going on and be aware, but they actually want to participate. They actually want to get involved and see how that they can help. And I think that shows what kind of leadership that you portray when you are getting your residents and your business owners to actually step in and get involved.
Okay, last question. Do you have any recommendations? This could be anything that you enjoy. It could be a piece of entertainment or a place, a walk that you enjoy taking. What do you think people should discover that you enjoy?
Oh, yeah. So it's actually kind of funny. It's the same conversation I had with Terry White. So I would say my favorite thing to do is cook. I love cooking. And so anybody that knows me knows I'm a foodie. I love trying new restaurants. And I love being able to kind of experience all different cultures of food. So I think the definition of a real foodie is that you like all food and that you don't have like a specific one that you like. So I like Latin food, I like Asian food, African food, Caribbean food, and then your typical bar and grill food, Italian food. I mean, I just like food. And so not only do I like those type of foods, but I like figuring out how to make it as well. So my cabinet is full of all kinds of seasonings, all kind of marinades. And I'm a from scratch person, so I will make sauces from scratch. I will make, all kinds of recipes that I've seen on like social media. I'm one of those people where I'll see a video and I'll go to the grocery store and buy the ingredients and try and make it the same day for dinner. I'm one of those people. So I like being able to kind of use my creativity and explore food in a way it's never been explored before. And that means like incorporating a lot of meatless options and dairy-free options and gluten-free options as well, to be able to, also put a little bit more of a spin on how are we utilizing some of the foods that we have now and kind of expanding more. So that means like going to some of the stores that offer different type of cultural type of seasonings and vegetables and fruits that we don't find in the regular grocery stores, and figuring out different ways to apply that. It's kind of it's like a hobby for me, but it's really fun.
Well, thank you, Lydia Millard, a city council candidate in Ward 10. I'm going to remind listeners that the caucuses are coming up on April 8th.
Yes.
Please
join. Come
Yes.
out for caucus.
Both city and mayor is on the ballot this year, so become a delegate if you want to influence the process.
Yes.
This has been the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.